10 British killers you've probably never heard of. When we think of British crime history, the same names tend to resurface: Jack the Ripper, the Moors murderers, or the Kray twins. But there's a whole other layer of chilling stories that never made major headlines or became household names. These are the cases of British killers you've probably never heard of, yet their actions left a lasting mark on communities, law enforcement, and the justice system. In this video, we'll explore 10 shocking yet often overlooked cases. Each one is presented with care, accuracy, and respect. No exaggeration, no sensationalism, just the facts. 10. Trevor Hardy, the Beast of Manchester. Trevor Hardy, dubbed the Beast of Manchester, carried out a string of murders between 1974 and 1976. He murdered 3 teenage girls: Janet Stewart, Wanda Skala, and Sharon Mosoph. These crimes left Greater Manchester gripped with fear, but Hardy's name rarely surfaces in British crime discussions today. What made the case more disturbing was how Hardy managed to evade capture multiple times. At one point, he even filed down his own teeth to avoid a forensic match to bite marks found on one of the victims. He also manipulated his girlfriend into providing a false alibi. Eventually, persistent police work caught up with him. In 1976, Hardy was arrested and later sentenced to life imprisonment. He died in 2012. Despite the brutality of his crimes, Trevor Hardy remains a little-known figure in UK criminal history. 9. Anthony Arkwright, the Butcher of South Yorkshire. In 1988, Anthony Arkwright shocked the mining community of Wath-upon-Dearne in South Yorkshire. Within just 48 hours, Arkwright killed 3 people, including his grandfather and 2 neighbours. The killings were gruesome, but Arkwright's motivation seemed equally unsettling. He reportedly wanted to gain notoriety and model himself after infamous killers. He even appeared to enjoy the chaos he created, allegedly taunting police during questioning and showing no remorse. A background of instability, combined with a fascination for violence, led him down a dark path. Arkwright was sentenced to a whole life tariff, meaning he will never be released. Yet unlike other British serial killers, his name rarely features in public discourse, making him one of the lesser-known figures in UK crime history. 8. John George Hay, the acid bath murderer. One of the more methodical criminals on this list, John George Hay carried out his killings in the 1940s. He was dubbed the acid bath murderer because of his unique method of disposing of bodies. He used sulfuric acid to dissolve them. Hay murdered at least 6 people, primarily for financial gain. He would forge documents, assume their identities, and take over their assets. His crimes spanned London and Sussex, and for a while, he convinced himself that destroying the body meant there could be no murder conviction. However, police recovered enough evidence, including human remains in a warehouse, to charge him. Hay was convicted and hanged in 1949. Although well known in his time, modern audiences are far less familiar with his story, despite its strange and unsettling details. 7. Stephen Greaveson, the Sunderland Strangler. Stephen Greaveson committed a series of murders between 1990 and 1994 in the city of Sunderland. He was convicted of strangling 4 teenage boys. Initially, police had no idea they were dealing with a serial killer, as the cases were not immediately linked. Greaveson lived a seemingly ordinary life and kept a low profile, which helped him stay under the radar for years. However, DNA evidence eventually tied him to one of the victims, and a confession followed. He was given multiple life sentences and remains in prison. The Sunderland Strangler case is a reminder of how some of the most devastating crimes can occur quietly, without widespread media attention. 6. Robert Maudsley, the most isolated prisoner in Britain. Robert Maudsley's name rarely makes it into true crime documentaries. But his story is unlike any other. He is currently one of Britain's most isolated prisoners, kept in a specially constructed glass cell in Wakefield Prison. Maudsley killed 4 people, 3 of them while incarcerated. His victims included convicted criminals, some of whom were said to have committed serious offences themselves. Dubbed by some tabloids as the real-life Hannibal Lecter, Maudsley has spent decades in solitary confinement. His case is often cited in discussions around mental health and prison conditions. Though not as publicly recognised as other notorious inmates, Maudsley is considered one of the most dangerous individuals in the UK prison system. 5. Graham Young, the teacup poisoner. Graham Young's fascination with poison began disturbingly early. As a teenager, he started experimenting with toxic substances on his own family. In 1962, he poisoned several relatives, leading to the death of his stepmother. He was sent to Broadmoor Hospital for treatment, but was released in the early 1970s. Not long after, he resumed his experiments, this time on his unsuspecting co-workers at a manufacturing company. 2 of them died. He was rearrested, convicted, and sentenced to life. Young died in prison in 1990. His case is infamous among criminal psychologists, but is less widely known among the general public. His nickname, the teacup poisoner, may sound quaint, but his actions were far from harmless. 4. Joanna Dennehy, one of Britain's few female serial killers. Joanna Dennehy is one of the rare cases in the UK involving a female serial killer. In 2013, she murdered 3 men in Peterborough and attempted to kill 2 more in Hereford. What made the case even more shocking was Dennehy's attitude. She showed little to no remorse and was reported to have laughed and joked during interviews. She was sentenced to a whole life order, one of only a few women in the UK to receive such a sentence. Despite the rarity of her case, her name isn't often brought up in discussions about British serial killers. Her crimes are a stark reminder that not all patterns follow expectations, and women too can commit heinous crimes. However, her case continues to be underrepresented in mainstream discussions. 3. Patrick Mackay, the forgotten serial killer of Kent and London. Patrick Mackay was arrested in 1975 and convicted of 3 murders. However, he confessed to as many as 11 killings. His victims were primarily elderly people living alone in London and Kent, making him one of the most prolific, but underreported, serial killers in the UK. Mackay had a long history of psychological troubles and was known to have violent tendencies from a young age. He was eventually caught after murdering Father Anthony Crean, a priest he had once known. Despite his disturbing confessions and the gravity of his crimes, Mackay never reached the notoriety of other British serial killers. He is still alive and serving a life sentence. Every few years, his name briefly reappears in parole hearings, but otherwise, his story remains largely forgotten. 2. Stephen Port, the East London predator. Stephen Port's case is one of the most recent on this list. Between 2014 and 2015, Port used dating apps, particularly Grindr, to lure young men to his flat in Barking, East London. He drugged them with GHB, causing fatal overdoses, and left their bodies nearby. The most alarming aspect of this case was the initial police response. Despite multiple deaths with similar circumstances, the police did not link the cases immediately, raising concerns over investigative bias. A later inquest concluded that opportunities to prevent further deaths were missed. Port was sentenced to a whole life term and is not eligible for parole. The Stephen Port case became the subject of a BBC dramatisation, but even then, his name isn't as widely known as other serial offenders in the UK. 1. Colin Ireland, the calculated killer. No one saw coming. Colin Ireland tops the list of British killers you've probably never heard of. In 1993, he committed 5 murders within a few months. all his victims were gay men he met in pubs in London. Ireland had no prior convictions. In fact, he had no violent criminal record at all. He set out to become a serial killer, literally. Ireland made a checklist of criteria to meet the serial killer label and methodically carried out his plan. It wasn't until he left behind enough evidence, including CCTV footage and a confession to police, that he was caught. Unlike many serial killers driven by compulsion, Ireland's motive seemed oddly logical and emotionless. He later expressed regret, saying he never would have committed the murders if he had found work or stable housing. He died in prison in 2012. Despite the disturbing nature of his crimes, Colin Ireland's name is rarely included in British crime retrospectives. His calculated actions make him one of the most chilling and underrated figures in UK criminal history. These 10 British killers you've probably never heard of show us that the most disturbing stories don't always make the biggest headlines. Their names may be unfamiliar, but their crimes shaped police procedures, legal outcomes, and public awareness. Sometimes it's the lesser-known stories that carry the biggest lessons. Thank you for watching this video. Please don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell.